Welcome to Faith and Work. I'm Carole Evans, and I'm so glad you're here. This podcast was born out of a passion to help people live boldly in their faith while embracing the work you've been called to do. Whether that's a boardroom, a classroom, a kitchen, anywhere God's placed you, you carry a unique light. Right where you are, you have the power to reflect the love, hope, and compassion of Jesus Christ in a way that no one else can. Your job isn't just a job, it's a calling. In your faith, it's not separate from your work. It's woven right in the middle of it. So let's go. Let's talk faith, purpose, and let's live it out right where we are. Have you ever had someone in your life that felt like they always had to one-up you? And over time, the relationship became like a rivalry? Maybe it's someone that you work with, someone that's even in your own family, someone that's in your faith community, or maybe you serve on the same ministry team together. In the Bible, we see lots of different examples of rivalry. We see the Israelites and the Philistines that are always at war and they're rivals over something. We see, of course, that one of the most probably famous family rivalries is Cain and Abel. They were both after the favor of God, and it resulted in Cain killing his brother. Then we have one of the interesting ones I think is Jonah. Because Jonah was kind of his own worst enemy. I see Jonah's rivalry playing out with the devil and the angel on one shoulder, kind of like we would see today in a comic book of, you should definitely not go to Nineveh. And then on the other side saying, you should totally follow God. And Jonah was kind of his own worst enemy on so many cases throughout that story. Then we have the story of Samson. Samson took a Nazirite vow to God, but then later on in his life, he neglected that vow. He forgot about that vow, and he ended up dying. And he was his own worst enemy. For today's conversation, I want to look at the relationship that we see in the book of Acts with Paul and Barnabas. These two men were working together, preaching the gospel together. You see them in chapter 15, and they are excited. They're going to be traveling around, visiting other churches and other people who are ministering and preaching and teaching. They're going to be encouraging them. There are so many good things happening right before this and right after this. And this little nugget, this little story, this account is nestled right in the middle of it. Paul and Barnabas were just about to take off for their journey, and Barnabas wanted to take someone that was what my son Jackson would call a noob. He was newer. He was a newer disciple or a newer believer. And Paul said, no, I'm not taking him. He's not trustworthy. I'm adding a little bit to the context here, but Paul did not want to take him. He said, no, he didn't stay with us in this other journey. He couldn't hack it on the last one. We're not taking him on this and on the next one. And in chapter 15, it says the contention was so thick that they went asunder. They split up. They said, we disagree so much, we cannot minister together. I'm going to go do my thing and you go do your thing. One of my best friends is also someone that I have the pleasure of working with every day. We met a little over 14 years ago when we worked for the same company. And when I think about my friend, and I can't even imagine someone new walking in and splitting up our friendship and saying, you know what? I can't even talk to you anymore. And I can't even imagine her saying, you know what, this new person, I just believe in her. And I am going to train her and equip her, and I'm going to mentor her, and you and I are just going to have to not be friends anymore. I can't even imagine that. But that's what happened with Paul and Barnabas. And it seems so silly, but we can look at our own rivals, and it happens so fast. Sometimes we don't even realize it's happening until a few years later. And then we think, man, did I really let that thing separate our friendship or separate our relationship? Years ago, we had a big family vacation where everyone else in the family was coming to see us for their vacation. And we were going to do some fun things in Gatlinburg. And my mom and dad, before my mom passed away, they live right down the road. My dad still lives there, right down the road from us. And so family, when they would all come to visit, they could walk from our house to their house, and some would stay here and some would stay there. And then we would go do different things during the day or in the evenings together. One particular Saturday morning, everyone was still walking around in their pajamas. I think there was some cartoons, probably Bluey, on TV. And there was donuts on the table, cereal, breakfast items. It was kind of a fend for yourself, relaxing morning. My son Jackson was probably about 6 at the time, maybe a little younger. I think he was about 6. And he came up to me and he said, "Mom, can I have a bowl of peanut butter M&Ms for breakfast?" And I looked at him and kind of did a double take. And he was completely serious. And he said, "Can I have a bowl of peanut butter M&Ms for breakfast?" And I said, "No, son, you may not. You can have cereal or a Pop-Tart or a donut or any of the other breakfast items that are sitting out for you. You can have something to choose from. But no, you may not have peanut butter M&Ms." Now, our family is a big peanut butter and chocolate fan, and we typically always have the big shareable family. I think it's like a 2-pound bag or something. We love peanut butter M&Ms. But I thought, that's crazy. So I went on about my morning, and a few minutes later, I see Jackson walking by me, and he has a styrofoam bowl full of peanut butter M&Ms. And I said, "Jackson, what are you doing? I just told you couldn't have those." And he looked at me very calmly, very confidently, and he said, "Oh, it's okay. Dad said I could." And immediately, my blood pressure began to rise a little bit, and I was immediately annoyed. And I looked across the room at my husband, and I said, "Babe, did you really give him peanut butter M&Ms?" And I'm trying to, be discreet, but my agitation is difficult for me to be discreet. And he looked at me super calmly, and he was like, Yeah, I said you could have peanut butter M&Ms. And he looked at me, a little puzzled, and he said, Is there a problem?" And I said, "We'll talk about it later." And he hates when I say that. And I try not to say that because it's an ominous thing to say, "We'll talk about it later." But I didn't want to have this conversation in front of the entire family. It would be awkward, and I just didn't want to do it. So we waited. Everyone, I think later that day, we ended up going to Kate's Cove. And everyone was going and getting ready. And the house was a little quieter. And he said, "Hey, can we talk about that breakfast thing? What was the problem?" And I was shocked that he still didn't know what the problem was, because I thought, surely it's obvious that I'm upset that you gave our son peanut butter M&Ms for breakfast. But he looked at me and he said, "Wait, what was the problem?" And I said, "Babe, we were all standing there when Jackson asked me for peanut butter M&Ms, and I said no." And he said, "Carole, I legitimately did not hear you say no. Our dining room and kitchen and living room is all one big open room, and I assumed that he was standing close enough to hear that conversation. Even if he'd been standing close enough, he didn't hear it, he didn't see it, he did not see the interaction, he did not know that I had just said no to the peanut butter M&Ms for breakfast." We talked about making sure that we check in with each other, but it wasn't about the peanut butter M&Ms. And when I asked him, "Why did you even say yes to that?" He said, "Well, Carole, I looked at the table and it was donuts and cereal, and it was like, Kix Reese's or something, like the peanut butter Reese's ones." And he said, "I just figured probably around the same calorie count, the same sugar count. Probably both of them are unhealthy. It's vacation. It's Saturday. We're all in our pajamas. No big deal. It's just another sugary treat for breakfast." And I thought, okay, well, that's kind of valid. We didn't really have a lot of healthy options at the time. It wasn't a healthy breakfast moment. It was a vacation breakfast moment, and everyone was kind of just fending for themselves. But that wasn't why I was upset. I was upset because I felt like the instruction that I had just given, I felt like he didn't respect it. And that wasn't what had happened at all. And those quick little moments, those little tiny slivers of time in the grand scheme of our life, they can pile on. We don't address them and we don't say, "Hey, let's talk about the breakfast situation." Instead, we just push it down, and then something else happens, and we might come back with a remark like, "You always get your way, don't you?" Or, "You never listen to me, do you?" Addressing those little moments right as they happen is so important, because my husband and I are a team. We work together. We have fun together. We go on date nights. He makes me laugh every single day. But those little moments can make us feel like we're rivals in our own home. It can make it feel like we want two different things, even though we really want the same thing. We want our family to be at peace. I don't want unrest in our marriage. But those little moments when we don't stop and address them, it can make us feel like we're competing. Like I want to get my way and he wants to get his way, and we are rivaling with each other, and we're butting heads over silly things like peanut butter M&Ms for breakfast when it's really not about the M&Ms. It's about who's going to get their way and who is respecting the other person. Maybe your rivalry sits in the cubicle next to you at work. Maybe every time you get an email, you get a phone call, you can feel their stare, and it just aggravates you and annoys you. Maybe it's someone in your family, and you feel like it's always been that way. Maybe you compete for the love or affection or attention of another family member, like a parent or another sibling. Maybe it's someone that you volunteer with at your church or your faith community. Maybe it's someone that you work on a nonprofit with or a parent-teacher association, and you just see that parent walk in the room and you think, ugh, why did they have to be here? They disagree with all of my awesome ideas. I'm so annoyed that they even walk in the room. Whoever your rivalry is with and whatever it's about, ask yourself a few questions. What is my part in the problem? Is the rivalry even still relevant? Sometimes thinking back on the rivalry that you have with someone else, it's been going on so long, it's hard to remember when and why it even started. And for some of you listening, it might be that the rivalry is so real, you remember exactly when it started and exactly what it's about. And even this podcast episode, just thinking about it, is making your hands grip the steering wheel a little tighter. It's making you upset. Just thinking about this person and this rivalry is upsetting to you. But you have to also ask yourself, am I mad because what they're doing is ethically wrong? Am I mad because my ego is hurt? My pride is hurt? I have two amazing boys who are the best of friends most of the time until they're not. One of them will do something that annoys the other one, and before you know it, we are rehearsing every grievance from the last 3 or 4 weeks. Usually it'll go something like this, and they will holler from one end of the house to the other, or from their bedroom to my bedroom, or the bathroom to my bedroom. And it will sound something like, "Mom, he hit me." And then I will yell back, "Eli, did you hit your brother?" And he will say, "Yes, but he threw a Lego at me." And I'll say, "Jackson, did you throw a Lego at your brother?" "Yes, but he stepped on my Legos yesterday. And he did it on purpose, and I just put that set together." And on it goes. When we get to that point in the conversation, usually we have to stop. And I'll ask some questions to the boys. I'll say something like, "What's really going on here? Why would you intentionally step on your brother's Legos? Why would you throw something at your brother? Why would you hit your brother? And what happened yesterday? What does that have to do with what happened today?" Usually their answers are something like, "He's always so mean to me. He never wants to play with me. It's never his fault. I didn't start it. I never start it." These absolute feelings drive their responses to defend themselves. And because they're so focused on defending themselves, they want my approval. Both of them want me to side with them. Eli is definitely out to prove that his older, bigger brother is wrong. Jackson wants me to side with him that his younger brother is feisty and mean and terrible, and I should definitely side with the older brother. Both of them want mom's approval. And we have to stop and we have to say, what is really going on? One of the things I often make them do for our family conflict resolution is I will make them say, nothing is more important than our relationship. This PS5 battle is not more important than our relationship. This toy or this Nerf gun or whatever the argument is not more important than our relationship. Sometimes I will have them sit on the couch together and tell me something that they appreciate about the other person. And it always starts with, "I'm thankful that he plays with me." and they go on from there. And we have to get really creative because I don't let them reuse the same thing more than once. And it takes a couple of rounds before they start really diving a little bit deeper. But when we don't address the silly little everyday rivals, it can turn into these big, tough adult relationship problems that follow us everywhere. They follow us to meetings that we thought we were good. We thought we were more mature than that. And then we look across the table at someone that's opposing this new policy that we have, and we get frustrated. Deep down in our bones, we get frustrated because we think this policy is a really good idea. And they are just constantly opposing us, and we see them as the villain and ourself as this poor, pitiful person, and we villainize them. And maybe they are. I don't know your situation with your rival. Maybe they really are awful and terrible. But sometimes it's us. Sometimes we villainize the other person to make ourselves feel better about our responses. It's human nature. It's our own ego and our own pride. I know I've seen that in my own responses. I've seen that played out in my kids, where they will villainize the other person to make themselves look and feel better about their own terrible reactions. Thinking back to the account of Paul and Barnabas in Acts, I'm so glad that account is recorded, because we can tend to romanticize the scripture. We can look at people and we hear names like Paul, and we think, oh, wow, Paul, well, of course, the Apostle Paul. And we romanticize it as if they didn't have problems, as if they were perfect. And they weren't perfect. These were real people with real emotions. They were human. They had pride, just like we do. Now, Paul was an amazing man. I'm not trying to take away from how awesome things God did in his life, but he was still a human being. He had a problem with another brother in Christ so bad, the tension was so bad, that they had to split up. We don't see him mention John Mark again until what most believe to be the last letter that Paul ever wrote in 2 Timothy. And he says, "Send me John Mark, for he is profitable for me." And I don't know what changed between Acts 15 and 2 Timothy 4, but I wonder if someone spoke up and said, "Hey, Paul, I know that this thing with you and Barnabas and John Mark and Silas, I know that all of that maybe didn't go as you had maybe thought or planned, but John Mark, man, he has really grown up and matured. He is really, man, he would be such a huge asset to you." I can imagine if we had the story of Paul and Barnabas played out in 2025 as I'm recording this, and thinking about what Paul would do if he saw Barnabas on Facebook with John Mark. And he sees them and they're in Georgia. Look at them down in Georgia. Oh my goodness. John Mark, don't you know better? Don't post pictures doing stupid stuff. But think about today in our modern day culture, how we would handle something like this. Sometimes the rivals that we have in our life, the part that we play is keeping the rivalry alive. When we think about, sometimes the person is not even in our life anymore, but we still keep checking in. We still ask other people in our life, "Hey, have you heard the update on John Mark? Yeah, what's he doing now? He's still a loser, right?" We keep it alive. We go ahead and check Facebook just to see if there have been any updates on his page, just to see what they're doing. Check and see who they've been friends with recently. And we intentionally keep it alive. I want to encourage you today, if you are keeping a rivalry alive, and there's some people that you need to just pull your car over, get your phone out, and just completely unfollow them. You don't have to put something on social media like, "Today I'm deciding to walk away from relationships that are hurtful." Don't do that. Just stop checking in. Just stop following them. Stop checking in on it. Stop bringing it up in conversations so that you look better. Just stop. When the parent comes into the parent-teacher meeting or the volunteer meeting at the school, don't look across the table to the other moms and the other dads. Can you believe they have the guts to be here after how they acted the last meeting? I can't even believe it. Stop looking for ways to bring it up. Just let it go. When I think about what Paul said in 2 Timothy, when he said, bring him to me for he's profitable. And I wonder who spoke up. What did he hear about John Mark that made him change his mind? It made me think about a silly story in my own life. When I had a perception of somebody that I saw from a distance, I didn't know a lot about them, but I saw them from a distance and I thought, I bet they're a terrible person. And I had a few small encounters and small exchanges with them. Not a lot. A few conversations here and there. Nothing more than maybe a minute and a half. So very shallow relationship so far. And I was talking to one of my friends. We were talking about people that we had in common, people that we knew. And I said, oh, I can't stand so-and-so. They're just so annoying to me. And she said, really? I think they're really nice. And she spoke truth into the lies I had told myself about that person. Because I really did not know them very well. I knew about them. I'd never had more than a minute conversation with them, and I had made an assumption of who they were. And when they walked in the room, they annoyed me as soon as they walked in, just because something about how they carried themselves, I just didn't like it. I couldn't stand it. The funny thing is, this person that really, really annoyed me, that I couldn't stand at the time, that my friend that I was talking to defended and said, actually, they're a really nice person. And she was so sincere. I was so surprised when she disagreed with me that I had to stop, and I said, really? And I said, honestly, I don't know them well. And I hate it when people make an assumption about me and they don't really know me. And they think they do because they see me from the outside, but they don't know me. And I said, I hate it when that happens, and I probably have misjudged them because I've just seen them from a distance. The funny thing is, this person that I didn't like very well is now my husband of 15 years. When I saw him at first, just something about him just kind of annoyed me. He worked at the college that I went to, and I thought that he was going to be like a friend because I had talked to him over the phone about coming to college. And then when I met him in person, he was kind of awkwardly serious and very focused and hyper, I don't know, he had this weird thing about him that just annoyed me. And what I didn't know is that he was intentionally trying not to give me the wrong idea because we were the same age. He was intentionally trying not to give me the wrong idea because we went to a small Christian college and we were the same age. And everyone immediately started saying, hey, you should date David Evans. And I said, no, I'm not dating David Evans just because we're both the same age. And they said, why not? You'll be great together. And I said, absolutely not. I'm not dating somebody because we're the same age. That does not mean we're like God's will for each other's life. Well, I mean, we did end up together, but it's so funny when I look back on it, and I had totally misjudged him from a distance, and I had just seen him, and I'd seen him walking around, and I thought his more quiet nature was him being stuck up. I thought he was arrogant. It was very much a Pride and Prejudice sort of story. He says that I had the pride, I had the prejudice. I disagree. But anyway, that's another story for another day. But I misjudged him from a distance because I thought I knew him. And I really did not take the time to get to know him. I don't know if your rival is based on a lot of facts and things that happen that are a problem, and this person didn't get this job and you got this job and now they hate your guts. I don't know what happened in your story. But I can tell you that God has given you a path to walk. He's given you a race to run. And He's given your rival, they have their own race to run. So don't get distracted with your race because you're so busy focused on their race and how they're running it and what they're doing. That is taking away from the wonderful, amazing journey that God has for you in your life. The miracles, the everyday miracles that you're missing because you're so caught up tracking the rivalry. You might be so caught up catching up with everybody on Facebook that you've forgotten to look up and see your family and your friends that love you and they're supporting you and they're right here in front of you and you can't even see it because you're so distracted by this rivalry that's got you tied to the past. So today I want to encourage you, if you're keeping the rivalry alive, I want to encourage you to let it die. Just let it go. If there's a rivalry that maybe the other person doesn't even know, David had no idea that I hated him. I didn't hate him, but I greatly disliked him. He had no idea. He was completely oblivious. Maybe the other person has no idea how you feel. They have no idea how their actions are perceived or how their actions are received by you. I want to encourage you to pray for them. Yes, pray for the rival. Pray for the one that sits across from you in the boardroom and that disagrees with you over the stupidest stuff. Pray for them. Pray that God would soften your heart towards them. Because if you are holding anger, if you're walking into the room and you are immediately angry, friends, that is not of God. That is not of God. If what they did is ethically or morally wrong, then you need to take the steps that you need to take to report it, to hold them accountable for that. But you need to know at the end of the day, whether anything happens, if it's ethically and morally wrong and that frustrates you because nothing's being done, I want you to remember that God does see it and He does know. And the judgment may not come the way you want it to. Maybe you want them fired. You want them gone. And it doesn't happen. I want you to understand, friends, that God, in all of His wisdom, knows exactly what's going on in that situation. He knows what's going on with the person who wronged you, or the person who wronged your family or a friend. And while it is very commendable that you want to bring justice to all of the wrongs that are done, there is no way for us to always do that. There is no way for us to bring right to every wrong. And by holding on to every wrong thing that's ever happened to you or that's ever happened to your family, by holding so tightly onto it, you're doing yourself a disservice and you're missing the amazing life that God has right in front of you. So friends, take whatever steps you need to take for accountability and then walk away and know that God has it. Sometimes when I pray, I like to lift my hands physically in the air and hold my palms open towards the heavens and just say, God, I have to give this to you because I can't hold it. I can't keep it. This is too big for me to carry. And if I carry this, it is going to bury me. It is going to smother me in the weight of the injustice of whatever it is that I'm so frustrated about. But friends, I want to encourage you to just hold it up, to lift your hands, lift your palms towards heaven, and give it back over to God. Do what you need to do, and then walk away. God has given you a race to run. Don't be distracted by how they are running theirs. Their judgment day will come. But right now, you have an amazing life to live. Don't miss it because you're chasing the rivals that were never meant for you to chase. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of Faith at Work. If today's conversation encouraged you, I would love for you to share it with a friend or a coworker. And I would love to hear what you think. So you can text me at 615-669-3209. I would love to hear your thoughts, your feedback. And if you have questions that you would like answered on a future episode, leave me your name and the city and state that you are reaching out to me from. That number again is 615-669-3209. I would love to hear your thoughts. I look forward to being with you again next week. Until then, let's keep living out our faith at work.